design from Consolidated when most flying boats of the era had fixed outrigger floats. Note too the large forward gunnery position and the large blisters at the rear for observation. Also note the position at the center of the aircraft underneath the large cantilever wing, which is actually a wet wing full of fuel, and the two great radial engines. Bob Cook and Bob Hill, the only men I know of who have ever piloted this plane at the Military Aviation Museum, we should point out this Catalina has been in continuous service for over 75 years. It's never been torn down for a major restoration. Oh, she's had a few big repairs here and there, a little bit of work done, a splash of fresh paint, but she is a working airplane that has worked continuously since the 1940s and has never been disassembled for a full restoration. This aircraft is kind of like a homing pigeon too. She served here during the Second World War, and so we're happy to welcome her back home and see that her new home is her old home. At the Military Aviation Museum right here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, she has flied these skies more than once. Slowly but surely. I think you get an impression for why they called this plane Jumbo once upon a time. That's what the bit of the plane was. You'll also still find seaplane ramps in position at Key West at Naval Air Station Key West in Florida. Flying overhead now, again, deceptively slow, crabbing a little bit with the crosswind, but here she comes. She seems so much smaller in flight than she does on the ground, but don't be fooled. This is a big airplane, and remember, that wing is full of fuel and is what gave the plane tremendous range and endurance and made it perfectly suitable for long patrols in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, basically all around the world. She also casts a pretty impressive shadow, too. Now, as far as her wartime service, PBYs came in a couple of different flavors. If you're Canadian, you might know it as the Canso, but to most of the world, she's known as the Catalina. Planes saw extensive use as bombers in the role of air search and rescue, and particularly in anti-submarine warfare. The wing may be a fuel tank, but it's also incredibly strong and capable of carrying a wide array of packages and ordnance. These planes were also used as flying hospitals, and sometimes they actually served as boats. Catalinas disabled in terms of their ability to fly could still be used to bring people home by literally sailing them. Perhaps if an engine was still good, they might be able to use that as a means of propulsion. But some of these aircraft actually having made hard landings or on the water or having been damaged beyond repair could still be brought home under sail, and it was something that happened more than once. A unique feature, too, is the ability to maintain the aircraft at sea. Not only did the wingtips, an angel of mercy, if you will, and is responsible for having saved the lives of literally thousands of people during the Second World War and in the years after, not only for air search and rescue, but also as a fire bomber. And until relatively recently, you could still see PBYs in their various iterations serving as fire bombers in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere, because with that great hull and the great lifting capacity of that wing, it was certainly suitable to carrying large consignments of fire-retardant material. Again, we'd like to recognize that today's flight of the PBY-5A is supported by Centera Healthcare, and we thank them for their contribution to this weekend's Virginia Warbird Weekend. So you could sling depth charges, you could put a large spotlight underneath, you could put conventional bombs, you could put a number of years. Unfortunately, his son met with a tragic accident as the plane crash landed and his son was killed. But for many years, Jacques Cousteau had not only his distinctive former minesweeper, which he used for oceanographic exploration, another veteran of the Second World War, but also his PBY-5A, which he used in oceanographic exploration all over the world. The Military Aviation Museum's PBY completed her shakedown flight in October of 1943 and was originally delivered to Naval Air Station San Diego. She bounced around and actually found her way to North Africa. Following in the great tradition of U.S. naval anti-submarine warfare missions, she also must have been joined by members of the United States Navy's lighter-than-aircraft contingent, which provided blimp observation missions in the Mediterranean at the same time. She moved around in the Mediterranean and then actually returned in 1944, returned to the Western Hemisphere, operating from NAS San Juan in Puerto Rico, and also operating out of Curacao. She went in search of German U-boats in the Caribbean and also in the South Atlantic. And we should point out that when the United States entered the Second World War, her ability to conduct ASW warfare, particularly off the United States coast, was quite poor. But it was planes like the Consolidated Catalina that would tip the radar that was used by the air forces for missions conducted in Western Europe. The British called it H-2S. But H-2S was actually derived from the earlier air-surface vessel radar systems, which were used in flying boats like the Catalina, as well as the short Sunderland and many other types. Again, their tremendous lifting power gave them the ability to carry the primitive radar sets of the day, which took up an inordinate amount of space and therefore required the lifting capacity of a plane like the Catalina to get them off the ground. If you've seen footage of German submarines doing crash dives whenever they see an aircraft flying overhead, it wasn't necessarily because they were concerned about being seen, not by the naked eye, but being detected by the ASV. And the ASV was just one of the many novel pieces of technology to come out of the Second World War, in which many of us were by the PBY and the P5M, plane built by the Martin Company. Now, I said the PBY-5A wasn't the biggest. No, she wasn't. In fact, the Germans built a very large seaplane during the war they called the Viking. And the British built what they called the Sunderland aircraft, which was known as the Flying Porcupine because of her tremendous defensive armament. In fact, when attacked on one mission by Me-110s and Junkers Ju-88s, by a flight of 6 airplanes, but they were known as the Black Cats, and painted entirely in black, mounting in the Pacific, occupied by Japan during World War II. So, coming around now, on the downwind, gear down, flaps soon to be down, Mr. Bob Hill and Mr. Bob Cope on finals at the Military Aviation Museum. This flight again today sponsored by Centera Healthcare. It's the PBY-5A Catalina, the Military Aviation Museum. So enjoy as she makes her final approach. Yes, a round of applause, please, for Mr. Bob Hill.